The year I almost quit investing for good, 1942, 11 years old, 3 shares of Citi Service Preferred, $38 a piece, saved every dime delivering papers to buy them. The price dropped to $27 almost the moment I owned it. I felt sick, genuinely sick. Here's the part nobody tells you about that story. The mistake that cost me the real fortune wasn't the drop. It was what I did next. I sold the second it crawled back to a small profit and walked away feeling clever. 80-some years later, I can tell you exactly what that early exit cost me. Millions, not thousands, millions. And here's why I'm opening with that memory tonight instead of some headline about inflation or interest rates, because the 5 mistakes that keep good, hardworking people poor, they're not exotic. They're not complicated formulas you missed in some finance class. They're quiet, they're boring, and most folks are making at least 2 of them right now today without realizing it. Stick with me for the next 20-some minutes. I'm going to name all 5, plainly. No jargon, no homework. And by the end, you'll know exactly which bricks are missing from your own fortress and exactly how to put them back brick by brick starting tonight. I want you to understand where this comes from because it matters. I didn't learn these 5 mistakes from a textbook. I learned them from 75 years of watching real people with real paychecks make the same quiet errors decade after decade. I watched it during the Depression when my own father watched neighbors lose everything to a single bad loan. I watched it in 1974 sitting in my office in Omaha while the market got cut in half and otherwise sensible men panicked. I watched it in 2008 too. The world was convinced the financial system was ending. I wrote a short piece for the New York Times that fall. 3 words summed up the whole thing. People thought I'd lost my mind. I hadn't lost a thing. I'd simply done the arithmetic while everyone else did the panicking through 15 recessions, wars, a pandemic. I have never once seen a patient, debt-free investor go permanently broke, not once, but I've seen plenty of smart, hardworking people stay poor their entire lives, and it was never bad luck. It was one of these 5 mistakes quietly, patiently compounding against them. So let's name them one at a time. Mistake number 1, the liability disguise. Mistake number 1 is the one that surprises people most because it's wearing a disguise. It walks around calling itself an asset. It gets toasted at parties. Banks celebrate it. Parents tell their kids to chase it. I'm talking about treating your home like an investment. Now, don't misunderstand me. A home is wonderful. Shelter is not the enemy here. But here's the thing. Nobody explains clearly enough. A house is not a stock. A house is not a business compounding its earnings for you while you sleep. Why? Because a house has a mouth, and that mouth needs feeding every single month. Property taxes, insurance, the roof that fails in year 20, the furnace that dies in February, always in February. I call that the upkeep toll, and it never stops coming due. Here's something even sharper. The structure itself, the wood, the shingles, the pipes that's depreciating the day you move in, crumbling slowly, the way everything built by human hands eventually crumbles. It's only the land underneath it that has any real chance of holding or growing in value over time. Most folks never separate those 2 ideas in their head, the crumbling brick and the eternal ground. And then there's the part that costs people the most without them ever noticing it costing them anything. Every dollar locked into home equity is a dollar that isn't out working for you anywhere else. I call it frozen ammunition. It sits there behind walls, completely unable to serve as dry powder for the next downturn. Ask yourself the question Charlie Munger taught me to ask about every decision, and then what? You pour every spare dollar into a bigger house, a nicer kitchen, an upgraded primary suite. And then what happens to your margin of safety? What happens to the buffer between you and a bad year? Here's the speculator in this story. He buys the absolute most house the bank will hand him because the loan officer smiled and said he qualified. He calls the equity wealth. He refinances to pull cash out for a kitchen remodel he doesn't need. And the day he loses his job, he discovers his fortress was actually a cage, a beautiful granite countered cage. The investor does something almost embarrassingly different. He buys a home he can comfortably afford on 1 income, not 2. He treats the mortgage as a controlled expense, never a growth engine, and every dollar he doesn't pour into square footage, he sends somewhere that actually compounds into ownership of real earning businesses. A house keeps you warm. It doesn't keep you wealthy. Mistake number one in one sentence: stop confusing shelter with a fortune. Shelter is shelter. Fortune is something else entirely. Something else entirely. Mistake number two, the borrowed bonfire. Look, mistake two is the one I find the most painful to watch because it's so completely avoidable. It's borrowing money to buy things that lose value the moment you drive them off the lot or unbox them or land at the resort. I call this the borrowed bonfire because that's exactly what's happening. You're taking borrowed wood, money you don't yet have, and setting it on fire for warmth that lasts about as long as the vacation photos do. Here's the math. Nobody walks you through at the dealership. You borrow $40,000 for a car. That car loses a third of its value the moment you drive away. Meanwhile, the interest meter is running the whole time on an asset that's shrinking. I call that the double burn. You lose on the asset, you lose on the interest, both at once. And then comes the trap underneath the trap, the underwater loan. You owe more than the thing is worth for years, sometimes the entire life of the loan. You're not driving a car at that point. You're feeding an anchor that's actively pulling you under while you make the payment every single month on time, feeling responsible the whole time you're sinking. Now, hold on. Am I telling you all debt is evil? No, debt is simply a tool. And like any tool, it can build your fortress or burn it down, depending entirely on which hand is holding it. Here's my rule. The only rule on borrowing you actually need: only borrow for something that earns you money while you sleep, a rental property that pays you rent, a business that generates a return greater than the interest you're paying. Call it the armor rule. Borrow for armor, never for ash. The speculator finances the boat, finances the watch. Finances the third vacation of the year on a card he can't pay off, telling himself he'll catch up. Next month arrives. He doesn't catch up. He never catches up. He's not building a fortress. He's lighting borrowed kindling. One statement at a time. The investor asks one question before borrowing a single dollar. Will this debt put a paycheck in my pocket or just a smile on my face for a weekend? If the answer is the weekend, he saves up and pays cash, or he simply does without. Mistake number two in one sentence: never borrow to fund a bonfire. Borrow only to build something that pays you back. Mistake number three, the empty vault. Now we come to mistake number three, and I suspect this one touches more people watching tonight than any of the others. Spending everything you earn, every dollar straight back out like water through a sieve with no bottom. I call this living with an empty vault, no reserve, no buffer, no margin of safety whatsoever between you and the next surprise life throws at you. Here's the trap with this one. It doesn't feel reckless while you're doing it. It feels normal. It feels like everyone else is doing exactly the same thing because, frankly, they are. The paycheck arrives on Friday, and by the following Thursday, it's gone. And you've genuinely got no idea where half of it went. Where did it go? People treat an emergency fund like a luxury, something you build once the real goals are handled. I treat it as the bedrock of the entire fortress. Without it, every single decision you make is made from fear instead of strength. Ben Graham had a phrase for this kind of buffer. He called it margin of safety. I simply call it sleeping well. Here's the difference that changes everything. A crisis versus an inconvenience. A flat tire is an inconvenience if you've got 3 months of expenses sitting quietly behind your walls. That same flat tire is a crisis, a genuine sleep-stealing crisis if you don't. Same flat tire, completely different night's sleep. Now I want you to do something uncomfortable right now in your head. Go looking for what I call the leaks in the moat, the subscriptions you forgot you're paying for, the convenience fees, the little daily purchases that feel like nothing individually but add up to a small fortune by December. The speculator never looks, he'd rather not know. He tells himself he'll start saving once things calm down, and things never calm down because he's never built the wall that would calm them. The investor builds the wall first before the storm every single time. 3 to 6 months of expenses sitting quietly doing nothing except letting him sleep. When I was a boy running newspaper routes around Omaha, I didn't have a fancy system. I just had a rule. The first dollar of every route went into a cigar box before I spent a nickel of the rest. Decades later, the cigar box turned into a brokerage account, but the rule never changed. Pay the vault first, let the world fight over what's left. Mistake number 3 in one sentence: pay yourself first or you'll spend your whole life paying everyone else. Mistake number 4, the lightning chase. Mistake 4 is the one I get the most worried letters about, chasing the get-rich-quick scheme, the hot tip. The coin somebody on the internet swears is going to the moon. I've got a name for what people are gambling on when they chase that lightning. I call it rat poison roulette, because that's exactly what cryptocurrency speculation is, in my estimation. Rat poison dressed up in a slick app with a chart that goes up and to the right until the moment it doesn't. Now, here's something Charlie Munger drilled into me for over 50 years. Calling someone who trades in and out of speculative assets an investor is a bit like calling someone who has a different date every weekend a devoted romantic. It's simply not the same activity, no matter what word you use for it. And here's the part the chasers never see: the silent grave. For every story of someone who turned $500 into $50,000 on some coin, there are thousands of silent failures who lost everything and never posted about it. You only ever hear from the survivors. Survivorship is not a strategy. There's a principle I lean on harder than almost any other: multiply by zero. It doesn't matter how many smart, careful, disciplined financial decisions you've made in your life. If one reckless bet wipes the account to zero, 0 times anything brilliant is still zero. Still zero. I've watched sharp, careful people do everything right for 15 years and then hand it all to a coin they heard about at a barbecue. 15 years of discipline gone in a weekend. Here's the boring secret wealthy families actually use, the one nobody puts in a flashy headline: the oak tree method. You plant something solid, you water it consistently, and you walk away for decades while it does the only thing oak trees know how to do: grow slowly, relentlessly, underground first, and then suddenly visible. That's the quiet engine of compound interest at work, and it has never once needed your excitement to function. It just needs your patience and your absence, frankly. The speculator checks the price 6 times before lunch. He feels the thrill of the green candle and the gut punch of the red one every single day for years, and somehow ends up no richer than when he started, no richer at all. The investor plants past the horizon, buys something wonderful, and simply forgets the password to check it for a decade on purpose, forgets it on purpose. Lightning never builds a fortress. Patience does. Mistake number 4, in one sentence: there is no shortcut. And the moment someone promises you one, that's the exit sign. Mistake number 5, the costume of wealth. Mistake number 5 is the quietest one and maybe the most expensive, because it's almost entirely invisible to the person making it. Keeping up appearances, looking rich instead of becoming rich. I call this wearing the costume of wealth, and a costume by definition is something you put on for an audience. It's not for you. It never was. Here's how it usually starts, innocently enough. You get a raise, a modest, well-earned raise, and almost immediately your lifestyle quietly inflates to swallow every extra dollar of it. The new car, the bigger apartment, the dinners out that used to be special and now happen twice a week. I call that the rising tide trap. And it's brutally effective because nothing about it feels like a mistake while it's happening. What's actually driving this underneath? Envy, mostly. Charlie used to say envy is one of the silliest sins a person can carry because there's a tremendous amount of pain in it and absolutely no fun whatsoever, none at all. Here's the gap that matters more than any number on a tax return: looking rich versus being rich. The man with the least luxury sedan and a 4-figure balance in savings is not wealthy. He's wearing a painted castle, beautiful from the road, hollow the moment you walk inside. And that costume creates something I call financial fragility, a person who looks completely secure from the outside, who is one missed paycheck away from real trouble on the inside. One missed paycheck, that's all it takes. Here's the truth. Real wealth almost always hides. It's invisible by nature. The wealthiest people I've known in 75 years of this business mostly drive ordinary cars and live in the same house for decades. I still live in the same home I bought back in 1958 for $31,500, somewhere in the neighborhood of $340,000 once you adjust for decades of inflation. People ask me constantly why I don't buy something grander, and I tell them I already live like a billionaire. My billionaire, not anyone else's idea of one. The speculator spends to be seen. He needs the audience, needs the applause, needs the world to confirm what he can't quite confirm for himself, and the applause is expensive, devastatingly expensive. The investor spends to be free, quietly, with nobody watching and nobody needing to Mistake number 5, in one sentence, stop financing a performance for people who, frankly, aren't paying nearly as much attention to you as you think, not nearly as much. Why good people make these 5 mistakes? Now, before I tell you what to do about all this, I think you deserve to know why smart, capable people fall into these 5 traps in the first place. Because it isn't stupidity. I want to be very clear about that. It has never been stupidity. It's the herd's whisper. We are social creatures wired across thousands of years to seek safety and the approval of the people around us. When the whole neighborhood celebrates the bigger house and the new truck, going against that current takes a kind of quiet courage most folks were never taught. There's also the today tax, the simple, very human pull of a reward right now over a reward decades from now. Delayed freedom doesn't applaud you on a Tuesday. Immediate gratification does every single time. And I'd be leaving something out if I didn't mention the wolves at the gate. Banks profit when you borrow more, salesmen profit when you upgrade. The entire system is gently, persistently nudging you toward the version of you that spends, not the version that compounds. None of that makes you weak for falling into it. It makes you human. The difference between the people who stay poor and the people who build a fortress isn't intelligence. It's whether they finally see the whisper for what it is. Once you see it, by the way, you can't unsee it. It's a little like learning to read forever after you notice every billboard trying to talk you out of your own future. So where does that leave you tonight? Here's the blueprint. And I promise you, it is almost insultingly simple. 1, stop calling your home a fortune and start treating spare capital like employees you hire to work while you sleep and real earning income-producing assets. 2, live meaningfully below what you earn. Not because deprivation is noble, but because that gap is your margin of safety, and margin of safety is the only thing standing between you and ruin during the next storm. 3, find the courage to be the one person at the table, not chasing the costume, not chasing the lightning. That courage feels lonely for a while. It always does at first. 4, and this is the part people skip, then wonder why nothing changes. Don't try to fix all 5 mistakes on a Tuesday afternoon out of sheer willpower. Patch 1 brick at a time. Pick the mistake costing you the most right now and fix that one first. Then the next. I want to be honest with you about something, because false comfort isn't comfort at all. This will not feel exciting. Patching a leak in your spending, refusing the bonfire, saying no to the costume, none of it will trend online. None of it will impress anyone at a dinner party. But I have sat with real wealth, quiet wealth for 75 years now, and I have never once seen it built loudly. One honest note before we close. Nothing in tonight's conversation is personalized financial advice. It's philosophy built from decades of observation, meant for education and reflection, not a substitute for your own research or a conversation with a qualified advisor who knows your specific situation. Now, here's what I actually want for you. Not a bigger house, not a louder car. I want you sleeping well at night, because that, in the end, is the entire purpose of this fortress we're building together. Brick by quiet brick, not applause, not appearances. Sleep deep, untroubled, paid-off sleep. 95 years has taught me one thing above almost everything else. The people who win this game are rarely the loudest people in the room. They're the ones still standing calm and unremarkable long after the room is emptied out and gone home, still standing. If tonight's conversation patched even 1 brick in your own wall, do an old man a favor. Hit like and subscribe to the Elite Money Mindset so we can keep building this thing together. One quiet decision at a time. I'll see you in the next one. Until then, sleep well.